Title: Lessons Learned from My Moments of Life. Author name: Banavara Krishnappa. Chandrasekhar. Publisher name: Book Writer Corner. Narrator name: Jennifer Wagner. All rights reserved. Preface. This book is about the lessons that I have learned from my life experiences. As we go through life, we encounter both pleasant and unpleasant situations, and each has valuable lessons to teach us. Through my own experiences, I have gained notable lessons, and I share them with the reader in this book. I hope you find reading my book interesting, and I humbly present it to you. Chapter 1: Addiction. All of us get to like something at one time or another in our lives. It could be a number of things like food, motor cars, and other material things that gives instant pleasure. A familiar one is that of people all over the world who take a cup of coffee in the morning as soon as they wake up. Some people cannot start the day without having a cup of coffee. As we grow and become adults, our taste also increases and expands to unfamiliar things. One of the familiar addictions is taking alcohol. Alcohol comes in different forms like beer, whiskey, gin, wine, and many other varieties, but all of them, over an extended period, become a habit and soon an addiction. Addiction is a habit that becomes a permanent part of life, and it's difficult to get rid of it. The people who take alcohol usually are called alcoholics, and they soon end up as medical cases. Alcohol is a disinfectant that has the power to kill human cells. There are organizations like Alcohol Anonymous which help alcohol addicts to get rid of their addiction. I like the great effort to get rid of alcohol addiction. I know some of my friends who were well-educated and good people with PhD degrees but got into the habit of drinking alcohol regularly and soon ended up becoming alcohol addicts. Smoking tobacco is another addiction. 2 of my college professors used to constantly smoke cigarettes or cigars. These were well-educated and knew the harm it could bring to the lungs. Just like alcohol, getting rid of smoking tobacco is also very difficult. Drug addiction is another harmful practice that could bring enormous damage to health. Musicians particularly become addicted to alcohol or drugs. We know some famous people like Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, and Prince succumbed to drug addictions. It is said that music is also an addiction, but it is a harmless one. Actually, listening to music every day because of a habit that helps calm the mind and develop a peaceful life. Medical experts advise people to take an interest in music which can have a beneficial effect on people's health. Interestingly, I myself found, at some point, addicted to a strange habit and found that ballpoint pens come in different shapes and sizes. Some are made of plastic, some metals, and others with fancy wood carved nicely. I collected ballpoints for several years. When I arrive at a place or an airport, the first thing I do is look for a shop where ballpoint pens are sold/on sale. I was not disappointed to find different kinds of pens. I discovered that ballpoint pens come in various colors and shapes, and they are manufactured in many countries. Over a period of time, my collection of ballpoint pens come to thousands. The source of finding pens was equally interesting. The pens were kept in banks, automobile centers, and medical and dental offices. It was, at one time, a practice among medical salespeople to bring ballpoint pens to the doctors as a way of thanking them for their business. At one time, I worked as a medical courier, and it was a place to find free pens. After collecting all these pens, I did not find any particular reason to use them all except for 1 or 2. What would I do with thousands of pens? Later I went to use them and found that they would not write because the ink in the pen filler had dried up. Unless the pens are used constantly, the ink will dry up, and find that a replacement filler has to be used. From this experience, I found that I need only one pen that writes at any given time, and that is good enough if it writes. In the final analysis, all of us can become addicted to one thing or other. If the addiction is not harmful to our health, we can say we are blessed. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Pennywise Found Foolish. After my pre-university, I had to attend a degree college, Central College, Bangalore. In order to go there, which was about 6 miles from my home, I had 2 ways, either to go by walk or by a bicycle. I decided to save the money from my job at the education department. The new cycle price was about 250 rupees in the year 1950 in India. This amount was my 4 months' salary at my work. I did not spend any money for my personal use but deposited it at our bank. My father's friend knew a vendor who sold new bicycles. My father and I went to the bicycle shop with my father's friend to buy a bicycle. We looked at several models and finally selected a bicycle that was priced at 230 rupees. We decided to buy it. At that time, the shop owner suggested that new bicycles are the target of thieves and that a good lock is very necessary to protect the bicycle from theft. The cost of a good lock was only 12 rupees or more. Somehow, we thought it was not necessary and could buy it at a later date. We went out of the shop with the new bicycle having only a small lock. I used the bicycle to go to college for 1 week. I normally parked the bicycle along with other bicycles parked inside the building of the mathematics hall. On the 8th day, I went to a mathematics class upstairs around 11 degrees clock. About an hour after, when the class got over, I went downstairs to look at my new bicycle, but it was not there. I looked around, thinking it could have been moved around to another place. But, nowhere could it be found. It has become obvious that the bicycle has been stolen. If I had brought a good lock, there was little chance that the bicycle would not have been stolen. By trying to save 12 rupees on the back, which was only 1/10 of the price of the bicycle, I made a foolish decision in losing the bicycle, and this can be called Pennywise Found Foolish. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3, Lesson from a Small Ant and America. On Veterans Day, the customary in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, hold a meeting at the center of the town where the town purple gathers every year to remember who went to war and gave their lives. It happens on every Veteran Day when the townspeople gather. This year, 2019, was the 7th year. The town mayor spoke first and brought to academics the names of people who went from Bridgewater to the war, like Vietnam. As a way to honor their service, the veterans' names were engraved on a tall stone pillar, including their name and the year in which they served. 1 minute of silence was held after all the speeches made by other people like the chief of police and representatives in the Massachusetts Assembly. After the meeting was over, a procession took place by the town people along with the firefighters and police people. They marched from the meeting place to the local cemetery where the people of the previous generation were buried. I myself did not follow the procession but started to walk toward my home. The cemetery had tombs of people going back to 2 centuries from when the early settlers came to Bridgewater from Ireland and England. I was thoughtful and engrossed in the event that I participated in. The whole theme in the meeting and observation was sacrifice and something to do for others without any selfishness. The soldiers that we remember did not think of their own life but thought of working for others and for the nation. In that pursuit, some of them lost their lives in war. This left us thinking what motivated them to join the army, knowing well that there was an imminent danger and that one day their life could be cut short by death. As I was walking towards my home with my head bent down and looking at the ground, I saw an interesting thing happening. It was a small ant carrying a load, a larva skeleton of an insect. That was probably the food supply for the colony of ants. The ant was doing its duty by going away from the ant hill to look for good and bring it to its house. I saw the ant war, a small one, yet we were still pushing the load twice its size. I did not see another ant or group of ants trying to help. There was no one to direct her or his work. This curious thing I observed made me think about what propelled the ant to do this job. Who directed this ant to take up this task? How this lonely ant was doing it without any help from other fellow ants. At some point, the ant stopped and took a rest as the load was heavy, but then picked it up again and continued the effort. The whole episode seemed to be a practice of duty and sacrifice to bring food to the colony. I thought about the determination of this ant and also the soldiers who pursued their desire to join the army and sacrificed their lives. It was a parallel situation between the tiniest animal, an ant, and a big animal, soldiers of humankind. Both were doing their jobs, and this can be called how the system works. The ant colony and a nation depend on an army to protect the nation. It can be summed up as a sacrifice and a sense of dedication. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4, Snake Bite and God. She was our neighbor, a middle-aged woman with a small girl of 6 to 7 years old. The women had never gone to school and came from a village near Bengaluru, India, where we lived. We came to know that she did not have a husband but only a boyfriend who visited her once in a while, coming from his village. Her boyfriend did not give her any money, and that made the lady suffer. Since she did not have any education, she had to support herself by finding any job that she could find. This is when she found a green vegetable with spinach-like leaves that grow near water buds. This vegetable is used in preparing foods like salad sole or a source of curry with rice. The leaves grow in abundance, and it comes to more quantity every 2 to 3 weeks. Picking the leaves is like pruning the plant, which stimulates growth. Every day she went out and brought a basket full of that green to the people. One day she came home tired and in a lot of pain. Soon she started crying with a loud noise. Neighbors knew the situation was serious after hearing her loud noise. We did not know what really happened, but we guessed that she might have been bitten by a poisonous snake like cobra. Cobras are found in India in many places, and only one bite of that snake could cause death. At this time, she was living alone with nobody to help her. Her boyfriend got the news that his woman friend was not doing well. He came to see her accompanied by friends. They saw her and did not think of taking her to a hospital or to a doctor nearby. Their faith in God was more than looking for immediate medical help. If they had taken her to a doctor or hospital, they would have helped her by giving her antivenom medicine to save her life. Instead of taking action, they believed God would save her. The only thing they knew was to sing devotional songs to God. Neighbors told the group to take action immediately and take her to the hospital, but they did not take any advice from others. As a result, the situation became serious, and the women's crying became even louder. Whenever the woman's crying became loud, the singing group used to increase their singing voice so that she could get relief from the big sound. This crying and singingly went on simultaneously for a whole night. By morning a sort of silence swept in when there was no singing or crying. It appeared that the woman died in the middle of the night. It was a tragedy hard to explain and understand the whole situation. This incident made me very sad and pushes me to think about the situation and analyze it. All of us are brought up in a religious background, whether as a Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, or Muslim. That's the way much of humanity is living with one faith or another. We have to make an intelligent decision when a problem arises for how much to depend on faith and how much our effort is needed. We all believe that there is a higher power that controls our life. But that belief should not prevent us from taking action on our immediate needs. Our belief in God should not prevent us from looking for a job to find our livelihood, and no God will hand over any assignment if we sit around looking for help. God is not going to send money to us to pay our rent and buy groceries. It is finally our efforts to save ends from any problem that happens. We should assume that God gives us the strength to find ways to protect ourselves from any problem that we face in life. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5, Caste System in India. Caste is an integral system in India. It was established over 1,000 years ago, and it has been practiced for over a generation. The caste system was established due to the need of society at that time. The caste system was divided mainly into 4 types. They are: 1. Brahmin class who did indulge in teaching and taking care of scholarly needs. 2. Kshatriya, warriors, who served in treating protection from foreign enemies, invaders. 3. Vaishyas, merchant class, were traders, selling things to the population. 4. Shudros, servant class, they were tillers of land, agriculturists, and people who worked in sanitation. The castes are again subdivided into several subcastes, and they have their own classification. One of the things that have happened regarding the caste system is that people prefer to marry in their own caste or subcaste. Due to this limitation and strict adherence, many modern-day young people have run into trouble. India is not the same country as it was some 50 years ago. Most people from all castes have gone to college. This situation allows them to meet young women or young men and fall in love. But when it reaches the stage of getting married, they face a lot of opposition from their parents or caste people because they do not want people of different castes to get married and change the traditional caste system. As we read in newspapers every day, young lovers have ended their lives by committing suicide frequently due to this circumstance. I ran into this caste system very early in my life. I was in middle school in the year 1940. I was around 7 years old. One day I fell sick with a high fever and severe headache. I could not go to school for 2 days. On the 3rd day, I went back to school. I found from friends that a lot of lessons were done, and there was much to learn about mathematics which I was weak in. I asked some of my friends if they could give me their notes so that I could cover the lessons. Everyone said that the notes were in their house and could not give that on that day. Only one of my friends said he had the notes in his hostel room and would be able to give them if I could accompany him to the hostel. The person who offered me the notes was a Harijan who belonged to the lowest of the castes. His hostel allowed only students belonging to the lowest caste Harijan, as no upper caste students lived there. Harijan was the name given to the lowest caste by Mahatma Gandhi. The government of India has classified them as a Dalit and has made efforts to provide them extra special benefits like scholarships to students and land for those who would like agriculture. I picked up the notes and left the hostel. This particular incident was very important and totally unexpected because of its significance. I will explain to you what I meant by that. India is a large country with 1.5 billion population, which is really 1/5 of the world's population. India did not come into existence recently, but it has a history of thousands of years. The scheduled castes or Harijan were called untouchables because they were given the lowest status in the caste system. Their main source of their income was scavenging and taking care of dead animals. The majority of them had poor living standards. Now the government had provided them with better living conditions when they got freedom in 1947 from British rule. When I returned home, picking up the notes from my friend in the Harijan hostel, my mother was waiting for me to return from school, and when she found out that I had gone to the Harijan hostel to get the note, she was not happy. Her feeling was that I touched my classmate, an untouchable. She did not know that we all sat together in the class and there was no segregation for Harijan students. Her old-fashioned idea came from her upbringing when they were told not to mix with Harijan people. Because of this situation, she made me take a bath and clean myself for touching a Harijan. The world in which we reside, this earth, comprises of different countries, different languages, and different colors of people, with numerous dissimilarities. There is no other way to find peace than by accepting all people of different religions or castes regardless of their origin on this planet Earth. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6, Words in a Letter to be Noticed. Carefully hidden message. It was in 1958 when I finished the degree program leading to an equivalent MSc degree. There were 100 students admitted every year to the Indian Agricultural Institute in New Delhi, India. They came from all parts of India, representing many states. Some were sent by their government, and a small minority of students were private students. I was one of the private students admitted to the Department of Plant Pathology. I was selected by the head of the department, Dr. R.S. Vasudeva. He had gone to England in the 1930s and received 2 doctorates from London University. He was one of the famous plant pathologists in India. Most of the students of the Indian Agricultural Research Institute came to pursue further to earn a PhD degree. At that time, in 1958, IRA did not have a PhD degree program. Therefore, the students wanted to go to the USA or England, where some of the former students had earned PhD in this context. I had written to several professors in the USA requesting a scholarship for pursuing a PhD program. OSD of the professors responded that they did not have any openings, but it was noteworthy that I got a kind response from a professor, Dr. George W. Cochran, of the Utah State University in Logan, Utah. Dr. Cochran was a research professor who had published several research papers in many reputed journals. Dr. Cochran wrote to me in 1958 that he did not have any funds to support me but wrote, "If I get additional funds, I shall keep your request in mind." That sentence made me think that there is some chance for me to go to the USA in future. I was willing to try again, and just persistence was required on my part. 2 years later, in 1960, I wrote to Dr. Cochran, reminding him whether there was any fund available to study in the USA. After some letters back and forth, he offered me an assistantship, scholarship, that helped me to come to the USA for study purpose. The importance of this incident is that I kept following up on his original letter and pursued further to obtain the offer from him in 1960. I found from this experience that persistence and pursuing a plan help to achieve success in life. If I had ignored his earlier letter, I would have lost my chance to come to the USA. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7, Getting My Driver's License. The majority of people in the USA can get a driver's license when they reach 18 years in most states. Coming from India, this was not the case, and I had no prior experience or familiarity with driving a car. Most people in India during 950 that I know had no car but navigated long distances by walking or, at best, used a bicycle. The motor car was a luxury, and only some could afford it due to the cost involved. Here in America, the picture is totally different without a private automobile. Since there is no mass transport available except in big cities, people have to have a private car to take care of daily needs like going to work, buying groceries, visiting any place or friends, or any other business away from home. As a student in the USA, I did not need to have a car as most of the time, I lived near the college. In 1967, after I finished my schooling program, I had to own a car because the house I lived in, Amherst, Massachusetts, was far away from my workplace. I bought a new Volkswagen Beetle for $1,900. It was a new car, and I did not have a driving license to drive. I had to apply for a driving license. Before that, I took some driving lessons from a driving school. When the driving school teacher felt that I had acquired the skills to drive a car, I applied for a license. I took the driving test 3 times but did not qualify by the inspector of motor vehicles to get the license. Every time I came from the driving test, the inspector sent me away, telling me that I did not pass the test and had to come again for the next driving test. After failing 3 times, the inspector asked me to come inside his office for the 4th attempt. Before the 3rd attempt, he informed me that I needed to acquire some skills to pass the test. This time was very significant as he was not only selling me a driving license, but he had some important advice for me. I value that day as the inspector took extra care of me. He told me that he gave a license to an 18-year-old student about 2 weeks ago. He was sad to learn that the student was killed after 2 weeks of obtaining his license. It made him very sad, thinking that he was partly responsible for his death. Due to this incident, the inspector did a special duty to talk to me about the importance of driving. He gave some valuable advice while diving, which I still follow even after 5 decades. They are: 1. While driving, you should concentrate at the front, holding the steering wheel. 2. You should look at the rearview mirror to check the traffic coming from behind. 3. Do not distract yourself and avoid reading, calling on the phone, or talking to somebody as it distracts your attention. Every day in the USA, someone dies or gets injured because of texting or using the phone to talk. I have followed this advice in my life and managed to live without any accidents to this point. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. I almost missed the train. I came to know that there is a big research institute of agriculture in New Delhi, India. It was called the Indian Agricultural Research Institute or PUSA Institute. The institute was first established in Pusa, Bihar when the British were ruling India. A big earthquake occurred in Bihar at one time that completely destroyed the Pusa Institute. Because of this, the institute was moved from Bihar to New Delhi. The institute is nearly 100 years old and has served India well. After my graduation with a BSc degree from Agricultural College Humbly, Bangalore, I applied to Karnataka University, Dharwad, India, for further studies leading to an MSc degree in plant pathology. I was supposed to study with Dr. Deshpande, a professor of plant pathology who had a PhD degree from London University. However, before I was able to settle down in Dharwad, holidays arrived, which lasted for 9 days, called Navaratri in India. The college was closed, and students went to their homes. I also left and went back to my hometown, Bengaluru, to spend my time with my parents. At that time, one afternoon, I received a mail from government stationery in an envelope. I thought it was a job offer from state government, but surprisingly it was a letter from the Indian Agricultural Research Institute for an interview. The letter was from the Department of Plant Pathology, and it said that I had to appear for an interview in 4 days, which was close to the next Monday after the weekend. The letter brought much joy and a lot of anxiety as well. Going to New Delhi was a journey of 4 days by train, which amounted to 3 days of daytime and the 4th day in the morning. The railway ticket amounted to 100 rupees, which was $25 at that time. We did not have any cash in our home at that time because my father's monthly income was only 80 rupees. And he did not have much to save after taking care of living expenses for a month. The time was short, and with all anxiety, we had to find some cash from somewhere. My mother thought about a plan which we did not think much about at that time. She knew the family of a grocer who used to supply us with household items like vegetables and rice, etc. My mother thought the grocer's family might have some cash as they have to trade every day. It sounds like a thoughtful plan at that moment, and there was no other source available. She visited their house and explained to them the situation of her son getting further education in Delhi. Realizing the necessity of such a request, the lady of the house readily agreed to give 100 rupees on an unconditional basis. My mother brought holding it in her hand. She was wearing a sari which had no pockets to put the money in. She arrived home with a smile on her face. I felt relieved that I would be able to go for the interview and fulfill my long-time desire. I got a ticket in third class and could not get a ticket in first and second class because they were expensive. The third class ticket did not have any sleeping beds but only a seat for sitting. The first class ticket holders had sleeping beds. The journey to New Delhi was about 3 days. There was a need to sleep, and I had to find a way to acquire a seat to sleep. I could not afford not to sleep and appear for the interview in good condition. Taking no action could put me in a difficult position for an interview. I went to Madras to catch the train which goes to Delhi. The train was called Grand Trunk Express, and there was only one train that ran per day. I was told by previous travelers who had gone to Delhi that I could secure the area where normally the luggage was placed. The luggage seat was enough to stretch my legs and sleep. I saw the platform of the railway station with the number of porters who were helping the passengers. But there was a curious difference between them. Some had uniforms with a badge on their chest, and there were porters who wore street clothes. I did not particularly notice the difference in the clothing of the porters. I kept some papers and money with me. Thankfully, I kept the letter of the interview at the institute and gave my bedding and clothes to a porter who did not have a uniform. He said that he would find a comfortable seat for sleeping at the luggage place. At that time, the train was in the process of forming and bringing together the compartments. After some time, about 45 minutes, the train arrived at the platform, where passengers could alight. I started looking for my porter, who could be in one of the compartments with my bed. I did not see him anywhere on that large train. I got anxious and felt helpless about the situation, which I never expected. I had no idea what I should do because the train would start in a short time. At that moment, with so much emotion, and asked a fellow passenger what I should do about the porter and the unpleasant situation. He told me to go to the police station, which was across from the railway. I located the police station and found a police inspector sitting at the desk. To my surprise, they found the same porter, and he was arrested and kept in the prison. My bed and other belongings were spread on the table before the inspector. He was taking an inventory of my clothes and bed. I stood in front of the inspector for about 2 minutes when he was still writing. After that, he raised his head and asked me about the reason for coming to the police station. I told him that I was the person who gave my bed to the porter for a sleeping place. The inspector told me that I had committed a crime by using an unauthorized porter and I would be arrested and brought before a magistrate on Monday after 3 days for a trial. That put me in a difficult situation because I would be in court instead of appearing for the interview in New Delhi. I was nervous, and with tears, I appealed to the police inspector, telling him that due to my ignorance, I had committed an offense that should have been excused. I showed him the letter that I had received from the Delhi Institute for the interview and that my whole future is dependent upon my education at Delhi. I apologized for my mistake and requested him to exert me and not take any further actions. I do not know why the police inspector took a look at my situation and agreed to let me go. He excused me and told me that he would not take any further actions, and I was free. I immediately wrapped up all my clothes into a bundle and put it on my back. I ran from the police station to catch the train in one breath, and when I entered the platform, the train had already started a minute ago. I could see the back of the train, which was nearly 200 feet away from where I was standing. I rushed toward the train to catch a place on the side compartment, as that compartment was the last one in that huge train. A gentleman was standing on the footboard and was smoking. After seeing me, he threw his cigarette and extended his hand to pull me to the train. I pushed my bed and clothes into the window and gave my hand to the gentleman standing. I went inside the train and closed my eyes to recollect what had happened. Later I was able to travel to Delhi and appear for an interview. I was selected for admission into the institute to study plant pathology. I successfully completed the course in 2 years. That degree and studying at the Indian Agricultural Research Institute provided me with greater opportunities to go to the USA and have a good future. Going back and analyzing these incidents, I have to remember 2 people with great gratitude who helped me. One was the daughter of the grocer who lent me 100 rupees, and another was the police inspector who let me go to take the journey. I will always remember them for their help. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9, Alternate Medicine Indians Ayurveda. It was wedding season in India. One of my aunts, my mother's sister, was going to be married. The wedding place was going to be in our house where the mandap, tent, was placed in front of the home. Nearly 150 people were invited to the wedding. After the program was over, my father and I got the space to sleep in the tent as heavy rain came on that day, and the ground became very wet. After cleaning away the stagnant water into the mandap, tent, we slept for the night. When the morning came, my father was not able to get up but fell down on me with all his weight. I could feel the invert of his body weight. He had a stroke. My uncle and mother moved my father to the house by supporting him on both sides of his shoulder. He could not walk on his own, and he was unable to speak. His speech was affected by a slur, and he could not speak legibly. It was a traumatic situation at that time for our family. My father was the only breadwinner in the family. No one had any knowledge about this disease of stroke. Immediately after this incident, the family doctor was informed about the condition of the father. Since my father was not able to go and see the doctor, so he made a house visit. After examining him, he felt it would take a lot of time to recover. He did not prescribe any medicine because, at that time, about 100 years ago, not much was known in India about strokes by Western medical doctors. My father was shown to several medical doctors, and none of them were able to provide him with any help. One of the interesting moments was a comment by a neuropathologist who said that some bugs had invaded his brain and there was no cure for him, and he might not live for a very long time. At this time, as there was no hope of finding any cure, the family put their faith in God and expected some miracle could happen so my father could regain his original health. My father was only 40 years old at the time when the Britishers came to India. They introduced the Western system of medical education in the Indian medical schools, and they had no knowledge of native Indian medicine called Ayurveda. Ayurveda has been in India for more than 1,000 years, and it depended mainly on herbs and plants as medicines. The concoction made from leaves and fruits of medicinal plants, as they had discovered, was given to cure the diseases. It helped people in India to get rid of diseases. The person that studied Ayurveda was called a pandit, and he was sought after by people who became sick. India was still primitive, and there was no telephone or any device to inform people about my father's condition. One day the priest who would come to our house to perform pujas, worshipping God by invoking Sanskrit words, visited. He did not know that my father had gotten ill and thought about a parishioner who had a similar condition and got cured by an Ayurvedic pandit. He said he would go to the house of the patient to find out about the Ayurvedic pandit and get more details. Something like a miracle happened at that time which no one expected. The priest went out of the house and started walking towards his house, hardly a mile away from ours. He found the Ayurvedic pandit walking towards him. The pandit was very noticeable to others as he wore a long coat and he had a mark on his face made of turmeric and a red dye. He wore a dhoti, a cloth wrapped around his legs and knees. He wore a turban, a hallmark of people who are college professors or high government officials. The moment the priest and pandit met, they decided to visit my father. Priest looked at my father, who examined his pulse and body in different places by touching them. He never used any stethoscope or any other devices to examine my father. His method was to check the pulse through which he could find out the blood pressure and also figure out what was going on inside the body. After examining my father, the pandit confidently said that he could cure the disease as he had already cured many people of this disease. My parents were excited and curious to know what he would charge as medical expenses. The pandit said that he would need a month to give medicine. He lived in another town called Mysore, which is 100 miles away from Bengaluru, where we lived. He had to use a train to visit. The only charge was that we had to pay for his train journey, which was about 1 or 2 rupees in those days. My parents were able to pay that much amount, and an agreement was made to start the treatment. The pandit regularly came for about 3 days a week and administered the medicine. The medicine consists of small pebbles made from leaves and bark. He never revealed the contents of the medicine, as it was the secret of Ayurvedic medicine in those days. Only the pandit and the people who prepared it knew about it. Again, the people had no knowledge of the ingredients or the proportion of 15 cocktails. My father started showing improvement in his ability to move his arms and tongue, which were paralyzed. In a period of less than a month, my father was able to stand on his own and started walking slowly. It was a thrilling experience, and everybody who saw this found nothing like this had ever happened to anybody. One thing I noticed was that the pandit never ate the food in our house. He was on his own strict diet and never touched food elsewhere. My father finally recovered and came back to normal life. He went back to work. His working place, which was a textile mill run by the British, was about 5 miles away. He walked every day to go to work. This incident of the sickness of stroke and cure by Ayurveda was a memorable experience that I have not been able to forget. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 11. Switch from the home library to public library. Being a student and lover of books, I started collecting books. Some books were purchased from bookstores and some from thrift stores. My collection of books became so big that I had to order a big bookcase from a wooden manufacturing store. It was nice and good to look at when all the books were placed in an orderly form. This gave me the satisfaction that I could read any book at any time. What happened next was another story. Due to my working hours and other family responsibilities, I had to postpone my reading times. The bookcase became a showpiece to show my friends and relatives who visited us. One day it occurred to me to visit the local public library. They had more books shelved in many rows, and the variety of books was also immense. I asked the librarian about becoming a member and how to take books home. She said that I could borrow up to 3 books and they could be returned in 3 weeks. There were no fees collected for these services. This looked like an exceptional offer, which I could never refuse. I found this service of borrowing books for 3 weeks as an ample opportunity to read many books. One thing that transformed me is diligently reading books without any procrastination. A change of attitude to using the public library became a good habit. I saw enormous possibilities in other ways, also. I found a group of people who met in a book club to read and evaluate books. There was also a writing club that met once a month to help aspiring book writers. End of Chapter 11. Chapter 10, Yamuna River, almost drowned. Yamuna River is a big river that flows in North India and continues up to Delhi, the capital of India. Yamuna is second to Ganga, Ganges, the mighty river. Both these rivers come from the Himalayan mountain, the highest in the world. I lived in Bengaluru, a town in South India. There was no river or big water body anywhere near Bengaluru. When I came to Delhi to study at the Indian Agricultural Research Institute, I visited Yamuna and got attracted to it. Some of the people of Delhi get up early in the morning and go to the river to take a dip and bathe. For Hindus, particularly, rivers are sacred, and taking a trip to the river in one's lifetime is considered a part of their life. When I first visited Yamuna, it was filled with a lot of water. Later, after a year, I found all the water had dried up, and I could walk on the river bed. This happens alternatively when the river gets filled up during the monsoon season. One day during the festive season, I went to the rivers. I also wanted to take a bath. I removed some clothes and got into the place where I knew there were steps to get into the river. I kept my feet one at a time, and soon after, I found my body under the water nearly 3/4 and found myself in a different experience. Next, I put my feet further and found that I have almost come to the drowning stage. I could see my eyes closing before water, and sure enough, I was going to die by drowning. I made noise and lifted both hands, asking for help. I did not see anybody showing up. Just as I was about to get drowned, I saw a young teenager who was swimming come towards me and put all his effort into lifting me. He asked me to get on his back, and he kept swimming and moving toward the bank. I was saved by this heroic boy. In that hour of nervousness and confusion, I did not get the time to ask the name of that boy or thank him for his help in saving me. From this incident, I learned a lesson about water. If you don't know swimming, that was the case with me, you should follow these steps near water. It's common for people to get into deep levels of rivers and seas. The following precaution and advice might help. 1. One should go to the water up to only half of their height if they don't know swimming. 2. Never go in the water up to the neck level. Because if you do, it could spell trouble, and you may get drowned. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 12, Child Labor. I am writing about a global phenomenon where many important countries are facing an increase in population, making it nearly impossible to find jobs. In countries like India, child labor exists in various sectors of life, including mining operations, restaurants, and small shops. This is also true in many underdeveloped countries, such as African nations. I myself came across this trend of using child labor. One day, I went to a restaurant in Bengaluru, India, to have a snack and coffee. When I ordered the items, a young boy of about 12 years delivered the meal. Later, while I was still eating, a young boy of about 10 years was seen cleaning the tables after the customer left. He came to my table and took away the items of the snack and coffee to his cleaning bag. I was surprised and also angry at this action by the young boy. I went to the manager to complain about this incident. The manager excused himself and told me the real problem involved in this case. He said that he could not find adult males to work in the restaurant because it does not provide a good salary. They have opportunities to work in other areas, like security guards, couriers, and taxi drivers. He explained that restaurant owners are forced to hire children of 10 to 12 years. Another reason is that parents are unemployed, and they stay home, but they send their children to work. The children are actually breadwinners, and if they did not work, the family would be starving with no income. I saw in 2 more places like clothing stores and other small grocery stores. The information I found about child labor is that the children are put to work in a place where adults do not seek employment, such as restaurants and neighborhood small shops. Another interesting phenomena is that young women or young adults do not go to work in these places like restaurants. It's only boys who work. By using children to work, society is destroying the lives of young children who will never grow up as productive people. They will live in poverty for their entire life. Parents must think about their children and make every effort to send them to school to get an education. Only then can they look forward to a better life. End of chapter 12. Ending credits. I would like to dedicate this book to Janakama and Banavara Krishnappa, my beloved parents, whose unwavering love and support made this book possible. Your guidance and inspiration have been my driving force throughout this journey.